All right, this is CC2 Section 3.1.1 and specifically looking at problem 3-8. Okay, so we are given a situation where we have two numbers and they want us to find the distance between each pair of points. So these are 2 points on a number line, and they want us to find out what that distance is between them if they were graphed on a number line. So what does that mean? So here I'm going to look at it on a number line. I have negative 27.1. So where is that? So I'll just put a 0 in place so we can kind of have an idea of reference. So just an estimate of where negative 27.1 would be there. And then the other number is 53.2. So I'll put that over here. So 53.2. So this is the estimation of where those 2 points would be on the graph. So what they're asking is what's the distance between these 2 points? How far is it between those 2 points? That's what I want to know. Well, if I look at this, the math on this would be to say, well, from here to here, from negative 27.1 to 0 is, so that distance right there is 27.1, right? From 0 to negative 27.1, that distance. And the distance from 0 to 53.2 is 53.2. So really, if I want the total distance, I'm going to take 53.2 and add it to 27.1. That would be the total distance. So that's 0.3 carry. So I have 80.3. So for part A, and it wants us to represent your work using absolute value symbols. Absolute value is the distance between a number and 0. That's what absolute value means. Okay, so absolute value of negative 27.1 is the distance between 0 and that number. So that's what I'm looking at, is the absolute value of negative 27.1 is that distance, which is positive 27.1. That's what absolute value means, the distance between that number and 0. So the absolute value of 53.2 is, well, the distance between 0 and 53.2, which is 53.2. So that's using absolute value signs. We found the distance between each of these and 0, and then we take those two and we add them up. And that's my final answer. So my final answer is 80.3 for that question. Okay, so let's look at B. So B, very similarly, if I'm looking at the distance between 71.53, or excuse me, 54, so 71 and 54 hundredths, and then the other number is negative 28 and 3/10. So I want to find the distance between those two numbers. Again, if I was going to look at it on a number line, I could have my 0 be here. This number would be the negative 28.3, and way over here would be 71.54, right? And so what is it asking? It wants to know what is the distance between those two values. So how do I do this with representing absolute values? Remember that this right here, from here to here, from that 0 to that negative 28, is the absolute value. Negative 28.3, the absolute value does mean the distance between that number and 0. So the absolute value is a positive version of that number. And then the absolute value of 71.54 is 71.54. So what are we doing? We're basically taking these two absolute values and adding them up is what I'm asking you to do. So if I add these absolute values, it's adding the positive of each of those numbers. I would get 99.84. And so there's my final answer. That's the full distance between each of these points. So last one, C. C is negative 38 and 9/10, and the other number is negative 7 and 3/10. So here's where this one's interesting, because if I look at this one on a number line, actually, let's do this. So here's my 0, right? So right here would be negative 7.3, and right here would be negative 38.9. So I need to find the distance between those 2 points. So if I'm thinking about using absolute value, the absolute value of negative 38.9, what does that represent? That represents the distance between that and 0, which is equal to positive 38.9, right? And then the absolute value of negative 7 and 3/10, what does that represent? That represents this distance between negative 7 and 3/10 and 0, which is positive 7.3. So how do I find this distance between those two? Well, it would be saying this distance minus this distance would give me what's left over, correct? Do you see that? So I'm going to take instead of adding these two, because I'm not trying to find the total distance of one and the other together, I'm wanting to find the space in between these 2 points, which would be taking these numbers and subtracting them. So it would be the difference of these two absolute values. So I can subtract these two and end up with 31.6 or 31 and 6/10. So that would be the distance between those 2 points. All right, I hope that helped.